Hi, I'm Chris Muchler, Principal Enterprise Architect and VCDX 257 from Virtual Elephant. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a microservices application to run inside of Kubernetes using ChatGPT in under an hour. Let's get started. As I talked about in my previous video on my Project SignalWave application that I've written to be a demo app leveraging microservices running inside of Kubernetes, I use ChatGPT almost entirely to help me write that application. Now, as someone with a programming background, but not someone who programs every day, and I especially haven't really programmed much over the last 10 years, ChatGPT and other Copilot tools have really become a game changer for me in 2024. It's allowed me to take the technical knowledge that I have and be able to bridge the gap to writing applications again. Now, back in the early 2000s and late 1990s, I was a prolific Perl programmer. That was the language that I focused on after taking many Pascal and C and C++ classes in college. Perl became the language that I was leveraging most in my early career as a systems administrator. Now, Python has really kind of overtaken Perl in the last 10 or 15 years. And so while I have a fundamental knowledge of how to program, writing Python code is definitely not my forte. And so being able to leverage a tool like ChatGPT really helps me be able to bridge the gap. I can take an idea that I have and then using ChatGPT or a Copilot tool, quickly be able to generate the code. And then I can read the code well enough to understand what it's doing and then do some basic troubleshooting. But then even when the code produced by a generative AI program doesn't always work the first time, I can take and debug it to a certain degree and then again leverage the generative AI tool to be able to fix the issues that I can't just solve on my own. And so this is really a game changer. And so for those of us who are out in the field and working, and for those of you who are maybe just starting out your programming careers, learning how to leverage a Copilot generative AI is really going to be a critical skill set that you're going to need to develop, I believe, in 2025 and beyond. Now, I had this idea early on for Project SignalWave, and I was able to write this application, and I'll link above to the video where I go through what Project SignalWave is, and I'll link to it in the description. But I really didn't record any of the things that I was doing when I was doing that and creating that program. And so I thought I would take another idea that I had for running an application. Again, this is just a demo application. It's really nothing crazy, nothing special, certainly nothing I would try to sell. But it was an idea that I had using the knowledge that I had, and then I wanted to take it and really be able to create it using ChatGPT. So let me show you how I've done that. So early on in my late teens and early 20s, and really even through part of my 30s, I would play Magic the Gathering. It's a trading card game. It was something that me and my friends would do on a Friday night. We'd get together once a month and play. And one of the interesting things about Magic the Gathering is that they make all of the cards available through an API that they've created for you to be able to go and download. So for this application, I had this idea of, hey, I want to show how to leverage an external API, go out and grab all of the Magic the Gathering cards and the sets that have been published over the last probably almost 30 years, download them, and again, put them into an application that could then be leveraged in a variety of manners. And so one of the things that I wanted to do at the brainstorming that I was doing was I will write some code. I will leverage ChatGPT to write the code to leverage the public API that Magic the Gathering has put out there. I'll show you where you can go and get it off of GitHub. Go out and get it, and then use the API to go out and fetch all of the cards, of which there are, almost 90,000 cards out there, and then put them into a message queue. Again, I already had RabbitMQ running within my Kubernetes environment as part of Project SignalWave. And so I would throw all the cards up there, and then I would have a Postgres database And then inside that Postgres database, I would then go read off of the RabbitMQ queue that I've created, the 2 queues, one for magic cards, one for magic sets. And then I would go through, and then any duplicates I wouldn't write to the database, but I would put in all of the card information into Postgres, and then ultimately have an Nginx front page where you could do some searching for a card if you wanted to and see the different graphics that were available to it. Again, this is a sample application. This is really an exercise in showing you how to take an idea that you have and then leveraging generative AI to be able to write the code and write the different services within the application to be able to realize that idea that you had. And so you can see here on the screen, this is a quick visualization through Hubble of what the app looks like right now. There's this magic, the card sync, and it's going out and connecting first to the world. So that's it using the public API to go out and grab all of the cards. And then it is writing all of those cards to RabbitMQ, which is running in a different namespace within my Kubernetes cluster. And it's actually the same RabbitMQ instance that I had running for Project SignalWave. So again, leveraging a common service within Kubernetes for multiple applications. So this is what it looks like from a quick perspective right here. And this is what I'm going to show you how I worked on and wrote this in less than an hour, leveraging ChatGPT. So you can see here, this is the RabbitMQ interface running inside of my Kubernetes cluster. You can see that I now have a queue for Magic the Gathering cards and Magic the Gathering sets. There's currently nothing in there. I'll show you what that looks like and how it starts to get populated as we look at the code next. So you can see here on the screen, this is the code that I leveraged generative AI, ChatGPT specifically, on helping me create it. And I'll show you all of what I did and how I did the prompts in ChatGPT in a moment. But I want to show you real quick what the working code looks like. So I had it create this Magic the Gathering sync Python script for us. It went out and figured out. And so what it's doing is it's connecting first to the RabbitMQ system service that I have running in Kubernetes. Again, I had that information. You give it the card queue name, the set queue name, the message queue rate, so that if you want to rate limit this application, you could. It goes through, and I have some land cards. So one of the things about Magic the Gathering, without getting too deep into it, is they have some basic lands. So plains, islands, swamps, mountains, and forests. I didn't want those cards in the database. I thought that it was unnecessary. So I went through and I put those in an array so that then they would ignore those and wouldn't push those up to the queue when it gets it. We create the connection. We do some error handling to RabbitMQ, and then we go ahead and we create the connection. We declare the 2 queues, and then we go through and we have a publish card subroutine here that's going to go through, and it's going to look for specific things within each card that the public API is going to give us. So name, mana cost, type, rarity, set, text, power, toughness, legalities, and the image URL. And then it's going to publish those cards up to the queue. There is one for the set as well, where I go ahead and I get the set name, the set code, the release date, the total cards in the set, and then I can publish those to that queue. And then I have a fetch cards by set. So one of the things that I found as I was interacting with the public API was if I tried to just get every card all at once, it was too much for their API to handle, and it would kill my connection. And so what I did was I go and fetch the sets first, and then I iterate through each of the sets, grabbing all of the cards. And so that's how I'm doing this. So it goes through and grabs the cards by each set, right? So it goes through, it starts a log message to tell me roughly how long it's going to take. Okay, and then for each card in the cards that the API tells me, I'm going to go ahead, and if it's in the land name, I'm going to skip the land card, and then otherwise I'm going to publish the card, and I'm going to increment the total number of cards within that set. And then some error checking is going to do similar thing for fetch and processing the sets. So this is the first thing. So it's going to go through, grab all the sets, and then iterate through all of the sets for the cards. So you can see the main part of the script, right? Fetch and process sets. That's this subroutine here on the screen. It's going to create a start time and an end time for me. And it's going to go through and just iterate through all of the cards. So I'll show you it running here in a moment so you can see that's actually executing within the environment. All right, so here's our putty screen, or our putty shell. It's opened up into my Mycelium Bootstrap. If I do a kubectl get pods, it's going to go ahead and show us what is running in this new namespace called MTG that I've created within the environment. So you can see I have my Postgres database running, and I have my Magic the Card sync, which is a container that's just running that Kubernetes script within it. So we're going to go ahead and just jump into that pod, because what I've done as part of the debugging is I just have the script loaded into the container, but I don't actually have the container running the script yet, so that I could do some debugging within the environment. So we're just going to go bin bash. Okay, so we can see here I have that Magic the Card sync Python script, and so we're just going to go ahead and run it. So you can see it's fetching all of the sets, does that relatively quickly, and then it starts fetching all of the cards. So you can see here it's just outputting this for us, what cards it's publishing, and this is just going to continue to run for about 20 or 30 minutes while it goes through and actually gets all of the cards. So if we switch screens here, and now you can see the RabbitMQ view of it, you can see that it is writing the sets as it goes through, and it's publishing the cards. So there's 2,500. And it's just kind of going up every few seconds. We can look in here to see the number of messages, right? So ready, 2,778. There's 3,179. So it's writing all of those cards to the Magic the Gathering queue that I've created, the MTG cards and the MTG sets within RabbitMQ. So this is what we were able to create in really just under an hour, leveraging ChatGPT. So now let's dive into actually what I did within ChatGPT to be able to create what I've just shown you here on the screen. All right, so you can see here on the screen, I've opened up a web UI to ChatGPT. I created a project called MTG application, and then I've gone and I've had this one query, and this is where I created everything in it, so it had all of the context. Now, the first thing that I did was I uploaded a Postgres deployment YAML that I had and an init YAML that I had as well. If you don't have these sorts of things, ChatGPT can even help you create those. And these are actually in the GitHub repository that I've created for this demo application as well. And so there'll be a link in the description below for where to actually go through and get this Magic the Gathering application if you want to play around with it and see what I did. Okay, and then there's RabbitMQ ingress and prod. I already had that running within my environment, and I decided, actually, you'll see here, at one point I thought I'd run my own separate RabbitMQ service just for this application, but then I was like, that's kind of silly. I could just leverage the one that's already running within the cluster and just treat it as a shared service. So I went ahead and did that. And so what I did was, you can see here the prompt that I initially used. I said, I'm creating a new microservices application to run inside of Kubernetes. It's going to leverage RabbitMQ for publishing information scraped from a card database on the internet. And that I wanted it to write updates to a Postgres database. And finally, there'll be an Nginx web UI to allow the user to search for a card from the database based on some properties. I said, I've created the Postgres database deployment using YAML, and I've initialized it with the correct tables and properties using the YAML code in the init.yaml file. And then I said, I've also created the RabbitMQ system. Okay, and then I want to go ahead and I wanted to pause. I wanted to analyze the files and pause for more information. So once I uploaded those files and pushed that prompt, it went through and it said, okay, here's what you've given me. Okay, I see that you have a single deployment for Postgres, the initialization script, RabbitMQ, and so forth. And then it makes some observations around what we can do. And I said, listen, there's an SDK for accessing the Magic the Gathering cards available at this GitHub website. I said, using that SDK, I want to create a Python script that will collect all of the card information that exists. Each card with its corresponding properties should be written to RabbitMQ, called MTG cards. And I said, I've used similar Python code in the past for RabbitMQ. Here is the code block for the RabbitMQ configuration. So I pulled this from Project SignalWave. This is one of the things. So I pulled that information so that it would have it. I said, here's how we're doing the credentials and so forth, and some of the error handling and whatnot. So it went out and it said, okay, here's the Python script that uses the Magic the Gathering SDK and RabbitMQ to gather all of the data. And so we can go ahead and make this big. You can see here, it gives me all of the code. And so what I do is I then copy that code into my Visual Studio, and I start to work on things, and it gives me an overview of the key components of the script, what's included. I said, great, now create a Docker container to run the Python script, which I've named mtgcardsync.py once per hour. So it goes through and it creates the Docker file that you need to run that container. So it goes through and it did that for us as well. So you take that information and put it up. Okay, and it says, oh, you're going to need this requirements.txt file to be able to have the different libraries that you want to make sure you have from a Python perspective. Okay, and then it tells you how to build the container itself on your host. So you go ahead and you can do that. And then you say, now create a YAML file that launches the container. The container should be retrieved from harbor.home.virtualelephat.com/ve/mtg publisher latest. That's my internal Harbor repo where I put all of my Docker containers. So it says, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that for you. And so it creates that. And then I say, oh, it did some weird things where it actually created it as a cron job within the YAML file, but I had already done the Docker file as a cron job. So some things were conflicting there. And I said, oh, I actually don't want it to do that. I want it to just run as a deployment. And so it made some modifications to the YAML file. So this is the YAML file that it eventually created. We tweaked it some more. Okay. So again, you're able to kind of iterate through using ChatGPT. Again, you've got to have a working knowledge of both Kubernetes, a working knowledge to a certain extent of how Docker works, okay, and the YAML files need to be created, and then certainly you need to have an idea and be able to follow along from a high-level perspective to direct the ChatGPT or the Copilot tool to be able to create the different pieces that you're going to need to create. Okay, but it goes through and you're like, okay, can you create the secret for me? I wanted to be able to do a secret. Okay, that was something I hadn't done in Project SignalWave previously. So it goes through and it helped me create the secret YAML as well. And then I asked some questions like, what does the message rate equal to if it's set to 1? To be clear on what it was doing, it was saying, hey, if the message rate is set to 1, it means the script will publish 1 message per second to RabbitMQ. That would take a really, really long time. I didn't want it to do that. But I did want it to be possible for someone to be able to, rate limit the application if they wanted to, so that, they don't overload their system. So again, it determined the logic for me. And I said, okay, I want to set it to 1,000. It showed me how to do that so that then I could start tweaking it. And then I found that, hey, there was some issues here. I said in the Magic the Gal card script sync, the following call is taking a long period of time to complete. Okay, because this is before it had generated any of the log information. So it really wasn't letting me understand what it was doing. So it said, I said, I want to go through and let's change that. So again, it goes through, it makes some changes to the script for me. So here's me iterating on that Python script, running it within the Docker container and finding out like, okay, this is working, this is not working. Here's an error message. I'm getting past that error message now and it's doing more information. So this was an early version where it was just publishing the card. Like I said, it was just trying to fetch every card that was out there. Like I said, there's about 90,000 cards in this database that Magic the Gathering has. And so it was just way, way, way too long. And so I was like, okay, in this code block, is it possible to have a debug message that outputs a dot or something for each card that it processes? Said also, is it possible to include a timestamp when the fetch starts and ends? So this is me trying to add in some detail, some logging detail into the application to be more robust. And I said, okay. It says it updated the function, and I said, okay, here's my new version based on testing. Currently, I'm getting an HTTP error 500 when trying to pull the cards. So now this is me seeing that public API really didn't like me trying to fetch every single card all at once. And so it helped me debug it. So I post into it, I copy and pasted the traceback information that was in there. And then it said, oh, let's write some error code in here for handling HTTP 500 errors. So I started to do this. Again, you're just kind of iterating on this and knowing how to do it. And it says, obviously, if an HTTP error with code 500 occurs, the script will wait 60 seconds before retrying the fetch. Okay, and I think, I think it's too much. This is me debugging. I debugged it a little bit. I was like, this is still having problems. So I tell it, I was like, I think this is just too much for it to pull all the cards at once. Can we get a listing of the card sets and then pull each card one set at a time. And so now this is me iterating more on that code in the version that I showed you that we've got running in the background right now. So it said, oh yeah, absolutely. So here, we're going to go ahead and publish the card. We're going to fetch the cards by the set, and then we're going to fetch and process the sets. So now this is getting closer to that final version that I have checked into the GitHub right now. And so it's like, okay, we're going to use the set.all API call to retrieve all the sets and then iterate through them. Fetches the cards for each set using the cards where set equals the set code.all, and then it still retries on 500 errors. Once I did this, now I was no longer getting HTTP 500 errors. And so I said, oh, I don't know what the set code. Can we first pull a list of all the set codes? Because it thought, oh, you probably know the set codes. Why don't you just tell it to me? And I was like, no, I don't know that information. Let's go out and grab it. So now it updates the code to go and grab all of the sets first. It gets all of the set codes and then use those set code numbers to be able to go and fetch all of the cards. So again, having a programming background is really going to be helpful to you. If you're just starting out, maybe you just finished a boot camp, a coding boot camp, you're going to have some fundamental knowledge on how things work. So being able to take an idea and leveraging ChatGPT to work through, how to do this is really going to, I think, make all of us better programmers, make us all be able to leverage a tool that can help streamline and accelerate the time it takes for us to be able to, have functional code out there for a job or a hobby project or maybe an open source project that we're contributing to. Okay, so it goes through and it does that for me. And I said, okay, great. And I said, it says the script's been updated. Okay, this is me realizing like, oh, it's grabbing all of these planes and island names, for like every different graphic that it has for every different set. That's hundreds of cards that I really don't care about. Basic land is basic land. Nobody really cares. So I was like, hey, let's start to skip those. Okay, so it starts to do that. Okay, and it says, hey, the script's been updated to create an additional RabbitMQ set called MTG sets. It's going to publish a message to MTG sets queue for each set, including the set's name, code, release date, and total number of cards. Because I was thinking like, oh, that might be good information to have within the environment. And so, okay, it's like, hey, here's how to do it. I said, okay, great. Here's where some legalities, because if you play Magic, you know that like there's certain formats that you play. And so those formats have certain cards that get banned or unbanned depending on what's going on. And so it's like, yeah, here's the different legalities: standard, modern, legacy, vintage, commander, and pauper. No idea what pauper is. I've never played that. Okay, but it says, hey, we're going to go through and start to update that based off of, because I was like, hey, I want to have that be a flag that eventually somebody can search the database for. Like if they're trying to build a commander set, I want them to be able to click commander and have it list out a list of all of the cards that are legal for commander or legal for standard or modern or legacy or whatever it might be. And I said, is this information available just at the set level? And they're like, hey, no, it's not. So it was able to, screen that, scrape through the public API Python code that is available that Magic the Gathering puts out there. And then it goes and tells me. So again, it's able to tell us based off of the information that you give us. ChatGPT is able to tell us a bunch of information. And so it even says like, hey, what can be done at the set level? And it says, while legality isn't available for sets as a whole, you could aggregate the legality information, and then it gives you some sample input or output that it could be able to gather for you. And then I asked it, then I started thinking like, I remember there used to be images for the different card images, right? Because sometimes cards will be, duplicated in multiple sets, but a new set with the same card name and function might just have a new image art for it. And I say, hey, does that public API have the image associated with it? And it said, sure enough, it does. And so I was like, hey, that's going to be something that I want to add into the database as well. Like, hey, wouldn't it be cool to be able to search for a card and then see all of the different card art that is available to it? And so again, then it helps me go through and create all of that added information into the new version of the script. And so again, just iterating on it one at a time. And I said, okay, here's the original Postgres schema for the database, right, that I created. I was like, hey, here's all the things. Let's make sure that we've got these new things like legality and the image URL added into it. So it goes through and it does that for me to make sure that that Postgres schema update has it as well. And then I said, let's write the Python script that's going to pull the sets off. So now I'm starting to move on to what I've showed you, which is it publishing all of the information into the queue, and now start to write the code to be able to pull it off and put it into the database. And so because it has that context, it's able to start writing that code to be able to pull off and act as the consumer. So it starts to do all of that code for us. So again, ChatGPT is a great tool. I was able to do this first set where it was using the public API to fetch all of the sets and fetch all of the cards and then push it up into my RabbitMQ instance in less than an hour to where I had it operating and functioning the way that I showed it to you at the beginning of the video. So really the purpose and what I want you to take away from this video is that if you have an idea for an application or a Python script or any kind of script that you want to be able to write, but maybe you're not a full-time coder, or you're just starting out and you're trying to learn a new programming language, whatever it might be, ChatGPT, generative AI, Copilot tools, these are all a tool set that you should be building out skills in 2025. If you're enjoying this content, please make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe to the Virtual Elephant YouTube channel, and turn on notifications. And I look forward to talking to you next time.